a millionaire managing director, is in desperate need of a fake fiancée for a crucial business deal. He's utterly shocked when she steals everyone's heart, including his own. You're out of your mind. Find someone to replace you in an hour. Ryan's voice thundered across the marble foyer, echoing off the high ceilings of the Caldwell estate. He was pacing near the grand staircase, his mobile phone pressed tightly to his ear. No, Jessica, this is not just another party. This is the last birthday my grandmother might ever have. He paused, his jaw clenching as the call ended abruptly. The screen simply read, "Call ended." He closed his eyes and let out a low breath, dragging a hand through his thick chestnut hair. His bespoke suit, usually crisp and perfect, now clung a little too tight with the weight of sheer panic. Jessica, his ex-girlfriend, had agreed weeks ago to pretend to be his fiancée for this one night only. It was all for the sake of a dying woman's wish and a crucial merger that depended on maintaining the perfect image. Now she was gone. "Sir, a splash, followed by a gasp. Ryan turned sharply. By the breakfast bar, a young woman stood frozen, a tray at her feet, with orange juice pooling around its silver base. Her pinny was askew, and her hands were trembling. Wide, startled eyes met his. Her name was Lily. He vaguely remembered her from the car. Quick agency hire last week. She was just a temp, helping to prepare for the party. "I'm so sorry," she stammered, bending down to gather the shards of broken glass. "I didn't mean to." "It's fine," he said quickly, striding over and crouching beside her. "Don't worry about the juice." She blinked, surprised by the unexpected softness in his tone. "I'll clean it up right away." He looked at her then, truly looked. A messy bun, flushed cheeks, and hands scraped raw from where the tray had fallen. She was clearly overwhelmed. She was clearly not meant to be in the middle of any kind of social charade. And yet, his grandmother's voice rang in his head. "I don't want some glamorous trophy, Ryan. I want someone who loves you, really loves you." Ryan stood, silent, watching her mop up the mess with a handful of napkins. "Lily, is it?" She nodded, her cheeks turning a deeper shade of pink. "Yes, Mr. Caldwell." He hesitated. The storm behind his eyes seemed to still for just a moment. "This is going to sound completely insane," he said slowly, carefully, "but I need your help for just a few hours." Her brow furrowed. "Help? How?" He exhaled a long, shaky breath. "I need you to pretend to be my fiancée, just for today, just for this party. I'll explain everything, I promise." Her mouth opened, then closed again. "You want me? Why?" "Because I don't have anyone else right now. And because you're here, and because you don't know me well enough to lie convincingly." Lily's eyes widened in disbelief. "That's not exactly a compelling reason, is it?" He let out a short, nervous laugh. "It's all I've got. I'm not good at pretending," she whispered. "I just spilt juice everywhere. And that makes you perfect." She stared at him as if he had completely lost his mind. "This is a once-in-a-lifetime deal," he said, his voice lower, now more earnest. "Not just for me, but for my grandmother. She's not well, and she told me she won't sign over the Caldwell Trust unless I find someone who truly cares. I was trying to fake that part, but maybe, just maybe, you don't have to fake it. Just be kind. Be yourself. Lily swallowed hard, the lump in her throat feeling enormous. What if I mess it all up? I'll take care of it, Ryan said softly. All you have to do is smile and maybe hold my hand once or twice. She bit her lip, her eyes darting to the elegant clock on the wall. 11:05. The party started in 55 minutes. Okay, she said quietly. I'll do it. Ryan blinked, taken aback. You will? She nodded, but only because you asked. Like you actually needed me. Not like you were doing me a favor, and for the first time that morning, Ryan smiled. A real smile. Not for cameras, not for deals, but for her. The dress didn't fit quite right. The hem was a little too long, the neckline a bit too modest, and the zipper snagged halfway up. But as Lily stood in front of the tall mirror in one of the unused guest rooms of the Caldwell estate, her breath hitched. It was the loveliest thing she had ever worn. Soft cream chiffon with vintage lace around the cuffs, borrowed from a forgotten costume rack in the old theater room. She smoothed the fabric with trembling fingers. One night, she told herself. Just one night. The mirror. Her reflection looked like someone else entirely. But beneath the beautiful facade, her chest thudded with a familiar heavy weight. Her medication was running low. Her last cardiology appointment confirmed what she had already known deep down. Without surgery, the odds were stacked against her. She hadn't told a soul. What was the point? A knock on the door pulled her from her thoughts. Lily? It was Ryan's voice, muffled but close. She opened the door, and his eyes widened. You look, he trailed off. Not polished, not glamorous, but real, she said, offering a shy smile, like someone people might believe in. No, he said, his voice soft. You look beautiful. Downstairs the party had begun. The grand hall was glowing. Fairy lights were looped over the ancient wooden beams. Soft jazz drifted from the grand piano in the corner. Guests in bespoke suits and elegant evening gowns mingled over champagne flutes as servers weaved gracefully between them. Ryan stepped beside her as they entered the room. She felt every single gaze turn their way. His hand found hers, warm and steady. You all right? He asked, under his breath. She nodded barely, just pretending. They began the slow circuit around the room. Ryan introduced her with a gentle, surprising pride. My fiancée, Lily. She smiled politely, curtsied once by mistake, and laughed a little too loudly at a joke she didn't quite understand. But each time she faltered, Ryan steadied her with a glance. Reassuring touch, a quiet word. When the room grew too loud and overwhelming, she slipped away, escaping through a narrow corridor, toward the kitchens. She needed air. She needed silence. Inside, the kitchen was buzzing with staff, but she went unnoticed, just another girl in an old dress. So she rolled up her sleeves and started helping the pastry chef arrange strawberries on a tray of tarts. You with the Caldwell party? The chef asked, not looking up. Lily nodded, "Brave woman," he muttered, then chuckled. She laughed. "It's just one night." But she stayed. She stirred caramel. She folded napkins. She listened as the sous chef vented about burnt crusts and last-minute menu changes. And when a young waiter spilled a tray of hors d'oeuvre, she was the first to kneel and help him clean up the mess. Back in the hall, Ryan had noticed her absence when he found her deep in a conversation with the gardener about the best way to grow tomatoes. He didn't interrupt. He just watched, and something tight and cold in his chest began to soften. Later that evening, the family gathered in the drawing room for tour, speeches, and cake. His grandmother, Eleanor, seated in her favorite velvet armchair, observed every moment in silence. When Ryan brought Lily over to greet her, the old woman took Lily's hand and held it gently in her own frail ones. "So," she said, a faint, knowing smile on her lips. "You're the one." Lily's voice trembled. "Yes, madam. I'm honored to meet you." The old woman studied her face, her hands, her eyes, and then looked pointedly at Ryan. "Different than the others," she said quietly. "This one doesn't pretend." Ryan opened his mouth but had no reply. Lily looked down, unsure if she should smile or apologize. The old woman squeezed her hand. "Keep her close," she said to her grandson, her voice suddenly sharp with conviction. "She's not here for the money. She's here for you." And for the first time that night, Lily stopped pretending, because she realized someone had seen through it all and still didn't look away. Breakfast at the Caldwell estate was served sharply at 8 o'clock. Not 5 minutes before, not 5 minutes after. The dining table stretched long beneath a vaulted ceiling where sunlight filtered through magnificent stained-glass windows. Lily sat on the edge of a velvet-cushioned chair, trying not to slouch, trying not to breathe too loudly. Toast crackled as the server placed it just so beside her plate. Across from her, Ryan scrolled through emails on his tablet. To his left, his grandmother, Eleanor Caldwell, sipped black coffee with the precision of a woman who once commanded Wall Street conversations with a single lift of an eyebrow. Lily stirred her tea in silence, her fingers brushing the delicate porcelain rim. This world, this house with its antique chandeliers and sprawling library wings, was not hers. But she had promised to play the part for Ryan for the paycheck she hadn't dared ask about yet, and for the surgery she might never get in time. Later that day, she found herself in the kitchen where the cook, Martha, was struggling with a creme brulee recipe for the upcoming charity gala. "They'll say it's too sweet," Martha muttered, slamming a spoon onto the counter in frustration. "Want to try a flan?" Lily offered gently, tying back her hair. "My gran used to make it with just 4 ingredients and a great deal of patience." By noon, they were laughing together. Lily stirred while Martha watched, a genuine student for the first time in years. They poured the mixture into ramekins, tucked them carefully into the oven, and when the caramel cracked just right, Martha hugged her. "That's the first real smile I've had in weeks," she said, her voice thick with emotion. In the afternoon, Lily folded linen, napkins into little swans and left one at each staff member's place, setting in the break room. She wasn't trying to charm anyone. She just liked to leave small joys behind, like breadcrumbs in case the day turned bitter. She didn't know Ryan had seen her, standing barefoot on the back patio, tossing breadcrumbs to the birds with the gardener. She didn't know he'd seen her kneeling to retie the scuffed trainer of the housekeeper's grandson who'd come to visit. But he had from his office window every day for a week. One morning, Lily was helping to polish the silver in the sitting room with Eva, one of the older maids. They were laughing over folded doilies when Eleanor entered. "Eva," she said, her voice cool and commanding. "Could you give us a moment?" Eva nodded and slipped out of the room. As Eleanor moved towards the window, she gave a small, sudden cough, followed by a startled drop of her wrist. A heavy jade bracelet clattered to the polished floor. It rolled once, then stopped near Lily's foot. Lily paused, glanced at Eleanor's face, which betrayed nothing, and bent to pick it up. With both hands she polished it, gently on the sleeve of her jumper, then held it out. "I think this belongs somewhere more precious than the floor, madam." Eleanor arched an eyebrow. "Most people," she said, her voice laced with cynicism, "would pocket it at least for a moment, just to test the odds." Lily smiled, a quiet but certain expression. "Then perhaps I'm not most people." They stood that way for a moment, the bracelet, a silent bridge between them. Eleanor took it back slowly. Then, without another word, she turned and left the room. At night, in the quiet of the reading room, Eleanor approached Ryan, where he sat by the fire, a novel open on his lap but unread. "That girl," she said, her voice more thoughtful than he had ever heard it. She didn't even blink when a fortune was at her feet. Ryan closed the book, his eyes fixed on the fire. "She's not here for anything but the moment," he said softly, "and maybe not even that." Eleanor looked at him, long and hard. "Keep her close." Another evening, Lily sat at the baby grand piano in the drawing room. Her fingers moved clumsily over the keys, tracing old lullabies from memory. Eleanor sat in her armchair, wrapped in a cashmere shawl. No staff, no guests, just them. Lily hesitated mid-note. "Would you like me to stop?" "No," Eleanor said, her voice surprisingly soft. "I haven't heard that song since my brother went to war." They sat in silence, the music as soft as breath between them. Then Eleanor asked out of nowhere, "What do you want from all this? Truly?" Lily turned to her, startled. "From the house, the party?" "No," Eleanor clarified. "From this life. From being here." Lily looked down at her hands, then up again, her eyes unflinching. "To be seen," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Even if just once, as someone more than her past. Eleanor didn't answer right away. She just reached for the edge of her shawl and pulled it a little tighter. It was the first time in years anyone had spoken to her that way. Not in fear, not with flattery, just with pure, unvarnished truth. And in that moment, Lily wasn't a guest or a lie or even a fiancée. for hire. She was simply someone who belonged. The days that followed felt strangely natural. Ryan, always a man of order and distance, found himself scheduling his meetings around tea times and book sessions in the sunroom. Lily had that effect, subtle like warmth that crept in without knocking. She didn't try to impress anyone, least of all him. And yet, every time she walked into a room, the very air seemed to change. Their fake engagement had taken on a life of its own. They sat side by side planning the official engagement party, discussing flowers, music, and guest lists. Ryan suggested white orchids. Lily suggested sunflowers. "They're too cheerful," he argued. "Exactly," she smiled. And he agreed. One afternoon, Lily helped Eleanor reorganize the vast library in the West Wing. Dozens of books had gathered dust over the years, many unopened since Eleanor's late husband had passed away. "You don't have to do this, you know," Eleanor had said, watching Lily climb the tall, rolling ladder. "I want to," Lily replied, brushing cobwebs from a tuckah, leather-bound hardback. Stories deserve to be read, even the forgotten ones. By dusk, Lily was sitting cross-legged on the Persian rug, reading aloud from a battered classic. Eleanor rested in a chair nearby, listening with her eyes closed. Halfway through a sentence, Lily stumbled on a line and made a silly face at her own mistake. Eleanor laughed, a sound that was sharp and sudden. It was the first time in over 6 years that such a sound had filled the room. Ryan walked in at that exact moment and froze in the doorway. Lily looked up, surprised, and Eleanor simply said, "Your fiancé has excellent taste in literature." Later that night, Lily stood by the window in her room, one hand pressed over her chest. The pain had started as a dull throb, but now it pulsed harder, sharper. Her breath hitched. She sat down on the edge of the bed, trying to steady herself, but the pressure built quickly. Her hands trembled violently. A knock came at the door. "Lily?" It was Ryan's voice. She tried to answer but couldn't speak, only managing a low whimper. The door opened. One look at her was all it took. Ryan was by her side in an instant. Her face was pale, her lips tinged with gray. "What's wrong?" he asked, kneeling beside her. "Tell me what's happening." She clutched his arm, trying to shake her head, to tell him it was nothing. He didn't wait. Scooping her into his arms, he strode down the hallway, shouting for his driver before they had even reached the grand staircase. Rain was lashing against the windows as they pulled out of the Caldwell gates. Lily curled against him in the back seat, her breaths coming in, shallow, painful gasps. Ryan kept speaking calmly, firmly, his hand clasped tightly over hers. At the hospital, they rushed her inside. A flurry of nurses, a gurney, blindingly bright lights. Ryan was forced to stand back, and even then, he stayed at the door, his fists clenched at his sides. Hours passed. He sat in a hard plastic chair in the corridor, his coat soaked through, his hair a mess. His phone buzzed incessantly in his pocket. He ignored it. He didn't move when a nurse brought him a cup of coffee. He just stared at the pale green wall opposite him, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. Why do I care this much? He asked himself, the question echoing in the silent hallway. She was supposed to be a temporary solution, a performance, a name on a contract. And yet, he remembered her laughing with Eleanor. He remembered her humming as she arranged books by color. He remembered the way she smoothed the napkins at breakfast without anyone asking her to. He remembered how she touched the jade bracelet and returned it without a flicker of greed. He remembered how she looked when she thought no one was watching, quiet, tired, but unafraid to be kind. When the doctor finally stepped out, Ryan stood so fast his chair clattered backwards onto the floor. "She's stable," the doctor said. It was a minor arrhythmia episode. "We're monitoring her overnight, but she'll be fine." Ryan exhaled, deeply, the relief almost painful. "Can I see her?" The doctor nodded. Inside, Lily looked small and fragile against the starched white sheets. Her hair was damp with sweat. A monitor beeped steadily beside her, a reassuring sound. She stirred when he entered, blinking groggily. "You stayed," she whispered. "Of course I did," he replied, stepping closer. "You didn't have to." "Yes," he said, quietly, pulling a chair to her bedside. "Yes, I did." She smiled, faintly, her eyes filled with something Ryan couldn't name but felt right down to his marrow. And as he reached for her hand, gently lacing his fingers through hers, he knew the truth with absolute certainty. This wasn't pretend anymore. The morning was soft with fog, dew, still clinging to the roses outside the conservatory windows. Inside, Lily sat beside Eleanor, her hands trembling slightly as she poured the tea. Her chest felt tight, not from illness this time, but from the truth she could no longer hold inside. "I think," she began, her voice barely louder than the steam rising from the teacup. "There's something I should tell you." Eleanor looked up from her knitting, her brows lifted, quiet but attentive. The older woman always had a way of listening that made silence feel sacred. Lily's fingers curled around the handle of her cup. "I have a heart condition, a rare one. I was born with it, but it's become much worse over the last few years. I've been on a transplant list for over a year." The words sat heavy in the air, too solemn for such a peaceful room filled with the scent of lavender and warm sunlight. "I didn't plan to stay long," Lily continued, her voice shaking. "This arrangement with Ryan, it was supposed to be temporary, just a few days. I thought I could help him, earn a little money for my treatment, and leave before it got harder." She paused. Eleanor said nothing, just waited, her hands still, the knitting needles resting quietly on her lap. "I didn't expect this house to feel like a home," Lily whispered, "or you, or Ryan, or the staff who treat me like I'm family. I didn't expect any of it." "And now?" Eleanor asked softly, her voice like the whisper of silk. Lily looked up, her eyes shining, with unshed tears. "Now I don't want to go. For the first time, I want to live, not just survive. I want mornings. I want music in the afternoon. want to learn what love feels like before it's too late. I want time to matter. A long silence stretched between them, the kind that felt more like holding your breath than emptiness. Then Eleanor reached over, her hand warm and firm on top of Lily's. "My dear," she said, "you matter already. You've brought more light to this house in a few weeks than I have felt in years. You made me laugh again. You made Ryan soften. You've reminded this home what kindness looks like." Lily sniffled, trying to smile through her tears. "But I don't know how much time I have left." Eleanor gave a slight, wise smile. "None of us do. But most people live as if they'll never run out. You're already doing more with each day than people with decades ahead of them. If this is your beginning, it's a beautiful one." Just outside the conservatory, Ryan had come to ask Lily about the engagement party menu. He paused, his hand half raised to knock, and froze as her words reached him. "I want to live, not just survive." It struck him like a stone to the chest. He stepped back into the hallway, out of view, his breath caught in his throat. The truth hit him with the force of a physical blow. Lily was seriously ill, and she hadn't told him. He leaned against the wall, his jaw clenched tight. His mind flashed with moments. Her laugh echoing down the halls, her patient fingers arranging tea, trays, her quiet way of holding a room together without ever asking for anything in return. His heart, the one he had armored for years against any possible attack, cracked wide open. He turned and walked slowly away, each step heavy with a feeling he didn't want to name, but could no longer deny. Inside, Lily wiped her tears and stood, excusing herself gently. She needed space, air. But as she walked down the hallway, she sensed that something had shifted, though she didn't know why. That evening, as the sky blushed with lavender and gold, she returned to her room and found a bouquet on the floor by her door. Gardenias, her favorite. There was no card, only a note, handwritten on thick cream paper, tucked between the petals, for someone who reminds the world what grace looks like. She pressed the note to her chest, and for a moment her heart fluttered, not from fear or pain, but from something soft and inexplicable. In his study, Ryan stood at the window, watching dusk settle across the great oaks on the lawn. He didn't turn when Eleanor entered, only tightened his fists in his pockets. "You heard," she stated. It wasn't a question. He nodded, and now he turned, his eyes darker than usual, but filled with a raw, undeniable emotion. "Oh, I know I need her," he said, his voice ragged with realization. "Not for trust fund, not for a contract, but because I can't imagine a future without her in it, and I don't want one." The estate glowed like a dream that morning, bathed in soft spring light. White lilies lined the path from the conservatory to the marble terrace, where rows of guests in their finest attire sipped champagne. Lily stood inside the dressing room, her hands trembling slightly as she smoothed the pale, mist-colored gown over her hips. It fit like a sigh, soft, ethereal, nothing like the borrowed costumes of her past life. Today, even if it was still Tatlashaka, performance, she felt like herself. Or perhaps the self she desperately wanted to be. Elena, the family housekeeper, fastened a tiny clasp at the nape of her neck, then stepped back, her eyes misty. "You look like someone a man would cross oceans for, my dear." Lily smiled nervously. He only had to cross the garden. Outside, Ryan adjusted the cuff of his tailored suit, the calm mask of a managing director fixed on his face, but his heartbeat betrayed him, wild beneath the surface. When the music started, a gentle string quartet, Lily stepped into the sunlight. Guests turned and a hush fell over the crowd. Her presence, delicate yet grounded, silenced even the most cynical among them. She walked towards Ryan with measured, graceful steps. Their eyes met halfway across the lawn, his filled with something deeper than resolve, hers with something softer than doubt. They stood beneath an arch of white roses as the officiant began the usual words of pretense, reading from a script that was supposed to be just for show. But nothing about the moment felt false. Ryan took her hands in his, clearing his throat. "Before we do the formalities," he said, turning to address the assembled guests, "I want to say something." Whispers rustled through the crowd. Phones were lowered. He turned back to Lily, his gaze intense and unwavering. This was meant to be a business arrangement, a temporary act, and I agreed to it, thinking I could control everything, including how much it would mean. He paused, his voice catching slightly. "But I can't pretend anymore. Because somehow, through every single moment we've spent together, through your honesty, your kindness, the way you see people and let them be seen, you've changed everything." He pulled out the ring box, but he didn't open it. "I used to think love was a liability, that caring too much clouded your judgment, but now it's the only thing that's made anything clear." He turned fully to her, no longer speaking to the crowd, but only to her. This was meant to be fake. "But Lily, I have never said anything more real in my entire life." Lily's breath hitched. She stared at him, words gone, her heart full to bursting. And for once, she didn't try to fight the tears. They rolled freely down her cheeks, grateful, overwhelmed tears as she nodded. He slid the ring onto her finger, and it shimmered in the sun like a quiet, perfect promise. The crowd erupted into applause, but Lily heard nothing but the whisper of the wind in the trees and the steady, hopeful beat of her own heart. Later, tucked away behind a tall yew hedge, she simply watched him. Ryan stood talking to an investor, but his eyes were only looking for one thing: her. The estate had never felt so quiet. The grand chandeliers still caught the morning light like frozen fireworks, and the scent of roses lingered in the halls, but the laughter, the clinking glasses, and the gentle hum of the string quartet had all faded into memory. The celebration, once carefully orchestrated as a staged engagement party, had become something else entirely, something real. But this morning, reality had returned in a different, more brutal form. Lily stood by the large bay window. In her room, a small suitcase at her feet. Outside, the garden was veiled in a soft fog, curling like breath over the hedges. Her fingers rested gently on the ring, still circling her finger, an unspoken promise that hadn't been taken back. She hadn't removed it since Ryan had slipped it there, his eyes full of hope and trembling honesty. But today wasn't a beginning. Not yet. Today she was leaving. The call had come at dawn. A donor heart might be available. It was not guaranteed. It was never guaranteed. The evaluation would be intensive, the risk enormous. But if this was her match and she missed it, there might not be another chance. She hadn't told Ryan. She had heard him moving about. Earlier, his footsteps pausing outside her door, then retreating. Maybe he knew. Maybe he didn't. Either way, her chest ached with everything left unspoken. Downstairs, the family had gathered, quietly in the drawing room. Even Eleanor, who rarely rose before mid-morning, sat upright in her favorite chair, a shawl across her shoulders, and something wrapped in linen on her lap. The fireplace was lit, casting a soft glow on the walls, but no one spoke until Lily descended the stairs. As she appeared, everyone stood. Martha, the cook, bustled forward and pressed a tin into Lily's hands. "It's that chamomile tea you liked," she said briskly, though her eyes glistened. "Hospitals never get it right." Then Eleanor stood, slow, deliberate, every movement still full of the quiet dignity that had once terrified Lily. But now her expression was something entirely different. Open, vulnerable, almost maternal. She walked to Lily and extended a handkerchief. White linen with delicate lace edges, embroidered with pale blue thread. The words stitched in careful, cursive read, "Come back." Home waits. Lily took it with both hands. She couldn't speak, couldn't trust herself to try, but the handkerchief trembled slightly as she held it. Eleanor gently placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. Ryan wasn't in the room. Lily didn't ask where he was. She already knew where she needed to go. She climbed the stairs again, past the room that had become hers, and into Ryan's study. It smelled faintly of cedar and old books, and the smoke from the fire he had lit the night before. His desk sat in perfect order, always meticulously tidy. She slid into the leather chair and pulled a single sheet of headed paper from the drawer. Her pen scratched softly against the page. The words came slowly, carefully, like exhaling a lifetime. When she finished, she folded the letter and tucked it beneath the small brass paperweight that had always intrigued her, shaped like a compass, forever pointing north. The letter read, "Ryan, if I don't make it, please know this. You gave me more than days. You gave me a reason to want them. Before you, I was surviving. After you, I wanted to live. That's not something you can fake. It's not something any contract can buy. Thank you for the music, the quiet, the space to be real. For your grandmother's laugh and for never asking me to be anyone but myself. I hope to come back. But if I don't, know that I loved you with the time I had and with the heart I could give. Always, Lily." She didn't cry as she closed the study door behind her, but as she walked past the kitchen where Martha once sang off-key, the hallway where Ryan had once brushed a flower petal from her cheek, and the dining room where Eleanor had laughed for the first time in years. Lily paused. She turned one last time, her eyes lingering on the staircase, on the windows, on the shadows that felt like home, and she carried it all with her, like a heartbeat beneath her coat. Home waits. 3 years later, the gravel path was just as she remembered it, winding, old, and lined with hydrangeas in full, glorious bloom. But everything felt new. Lily stepped out of the car slowly, a gentle smile playing on her lips. Her breath was easy and even in her chest, a simple miracle she never took for granted. The front doors of the Caldwell estate opened. Ryan stepped out, not with a bouquet, but with a small, laughing toddler balanced on his hip, a little girl with his chestnut hair, and Lily's bright, curious eyes. "Mommy!" the girl squealed, wriggling to get down. Lily's heart, the one that had been a stranger in her own body now, felt like it had belonged there forever. It swelled with a love so profound, it still took her breath away sometimes. She knelt, her arms open wide, and scooped her daughter into a hug, burying her face in the sweet-smelling curls. Ryan walked down the steps, his gaze filled with a quiet, steady adoration that had never once wavered. He didn't need grand gestures anymore. Their love lived in these small, perfect moments. "Welcome home," he said, his voice soft as he leaned down to kiss her. "I'm always home when I'm with you," she whispered back. In the doorway, Eleanor appeared, leaning on her cane, but looking 10 years younger than the day they first met. She watched them, a genuine, warm smile gracing her features. The pretense was a distant memory, a strange, beautiful prologue to the life they had built. A life of shared mornings, music in the afternoons, and a love that had proven stronger than any contract, truer than any lie. It was a life she had once only dared to whisper about in a sunlit conservatory, a life she had earned, a life she had been given. And it was more beautiful than she had ever imagined. If this story stirred something in your heart and made you believe in the quiet power of kindness, the healing of love, and the beauty of second chances, then you're not alone. Lily and Ryan's journey wasn't about perfection. It was about choosing love in the middle of uncertainty and finding a home, not in a place, but in a person who sees you fully and still stays. If stories like this move you, uplift you, and remind you that the most powerful love often grows from the most unexpected places, please don't forget to subscribe to Soul Stirring Stories. We're here to bring you tales that heal, inspire, and linger long after the last word is spoken. Because sometimes one story can change the way you see everything.